Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Lorenzo Amer, and I'm wishing you a happy Halloween. I'm dressed as Forrest Gump today, and I really wasn't sure what to review today. I just reviewed Barbarian, but I decided to do another because I wanted to do one in my Halloween costume. And I wanted to do, at first, Werewolf by Night, and then I wanted to do Love and Monsters, then I wanted to do The Shining, and then Doctor Sleep. And I figured, let's talk about both The Shining and Doctor Sleep, because I like them both the same. In the end, I'm going to give them the same grade because I think they're both about on equal par with each other. I think they're both really great movies. So let's start with the original, The Shining. The Shining was directed by the legendary Stanley Kubrick, who you might know from various movies such as Doctor Strangelove or Full Metal Jacket. Those are some of his more popular movies. He's obviously made others that are all phenomenal. But anyways, in The Shining, a family agrees to look over the Overlook Hotel. And during this stay at the Overlook Hotel, though they all assure themselves that they're gonna be safe throughout this experience, sinister presences think otherwise. These sinister presences that are haunting the Overlook Hotel try and push this family into madness. And that can only be worse by the severe sense of being trapped as snow begins to build up during a snowstorm. So this family with clear problems, their father, Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, is an alcoholic. Their son, Danny, can somehow see dead people. He has a gift called The Shining. And the wife and mother, Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, is just trying her hardest to keep everyone together. And through this family dynamic, we can see madness start to brew. And that is where The Shining is gold. Very obviously, one of the best parts of The Shining is the performances. The performances in this movie are phenomenal. Very obviously, there's Jack Nicholson playing Jack Torrance, who perfectly nails his character's descent into madness. I honestly thought Jack Nicholson in this movie was one of the most impressive performances I've ever seen in my life. Easily in the top 10 greatest performances of all time. He was phenomenal in this movie. He nailed his role as an alcoholic father with severe anger issues. He nailed that role perfectly. You can kind of tell whenever he's about to go mad, either get mad or go mad. But also, he has a weird sense of unpredictability about him, and in there, that's what makes him such a menacing villain. I really admire how well Jack Nicholson did in this movie. It is impressive. And then there's also Shelley Duvall, who very unfortunately was verbally abused on the set of this movie. This is a very infamous incident in which Shelley Duvall, after this movie, was never the same again. Unfortunately, that was what elevated her performance so much. Her performance in this movie was incredible. It's really a shame that we couldn't see more of her after The Shining. It's truly a shame because I think, honestly, she gave an incredible performance in this movie. One thing that I haven't seen much love for The Shining about is how well directed this movie is. There's one scene that I want to point to in particular that just shows how well directed this was on Kubrick's behalf. And it also has to do with the cinematography. I cannot pronounce that for the life of me quickly. Anyways, in this movie, there's a scene where Shelley Duvall's Wendy Torrance is dragging her husband, Jack Torrance, into a food storage room and then locks him up. Very obviously, Jack Torrance is at the mercy of his wife. He cannot get out of this room without Wendy unlocking it for him. He can't. But the way this scene is framed does not show Wendy having the power at all. It's shot so that Wendy is actually seen at a downwards angle, while the camera is actually right below Jack Nicholson whenever he's on screen. So that way, he's actually seen as above Wendy. And it's just so clever the way that was shot. I don't know why I was just so impressed by the way that scene was shot, but it just shows how competent Kubrick was when he directed this movie. He did an incredible job on this, and I really admire how well directed this movie was. Another thing I've got to admire heavily about The Shining is how actually scary this movie is. This movie is 42 years old, and it still terrified me. I watched it for the first time the other night, and usually I'm not scared by, older movies. No offense to them, I still think they're great movies. It just doesn't really get under my skin anymore. But The Shining was different. This movie actually scared the bejesus out of me. My goodness, wow. And it's just all the creepy imagery, the shots that actually are left unexplained. Like, there's some really weird scenes in here that just are never left resolved. And it's that is part of the reason that makes it crawl under your skin. That there are scenes that you don't understand, that are never explained. And so they stick in your mind, they burrow in there, and they make you think about them, and you relive them over and over, and they terrify you because of that. That is genius. Everything about that is really, really smart. I absolutely love that. I think that's a genius way to get scares in movies. That's a great way to create a spooky atmosphere in a movie. I wish more movies did that today. They didn't explain everything so much. Well, granted, it's nice for things to be explained to you, but then again, there are just some things that when they aren't explained, they stick, and when they stick, they haunt, and I love it. Another thing I really love about The Shining always is Scatman Crothers' character in this movie, Dick Halloran. Just the way Crothers portrays him is just so wholesome and adorable. I really love Dick Halloran in this movie. I think he's just such a likable character. I love him. He's amazing. Not to mention, The Shining is just an iconic movie. There's so many little shots from this movie that just remain relevant in pop culture to this day, 42 years later. It is amazing always. I loved seeing this movie and seeing all these like little scenes that I've seen referenced so many times, like the Grady twins, the Here's Johnny scene, which is by far the most iconic part of this movie, the elevator of blood. I saw this the other night and honestly just had such a good feeling in my brain seeing all these scenes and thinking like, I have seen that so many times before. I'm so happy that there's finally context to it. That's just something, I don't know why I felt like including that. It just made me feel happy watching this movie. Surprisingly, that's all I have to say on The Shining. I really wish I could say more, but there's not much to say that hasn't already been said. I really enjoyed The Shining. I thought it was a phenomenal movie. I'm happy that this Halloween I finally got around to watching it. I can understand why it's on that movie poster back there, that 100 movies that you need to see before you die. I completely understand why that's on there. I'm a big advocate that you need to see The Shining before you die now. I completely agree. Moving on, we talk about Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep was directed by Mike Flanagan, who I strongly believe to be one of the greatest horror directors currently working today. He's worked on both The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor. He worked on Hush, Oculus, a pretty good sequel to the Ouija movie, and Midnight Mass, which I honestly believe is the best thing to ever be put on Netflix. Like, it is by far the best Netflix original. I cannot think of anything that's been better than Midnight Mass. It is a phenomenal show. If you haven't seen it already, you got it. It is. You'd love it. You'd love it. Because I love it. And if you were watching me, then you should take my recommendations. I guess I don't mean to sound pompous. I'm sorry. But anyway, Doctor Sleep is directed by Mike Flanagan and takes place almost 40 years after the original Shining. It is the sequel in which it follows Jack Torrance and Wendy Torrance's son, Danny Torrance, after the events of The Shining, in which he's still traumatized from it. He still has his power, his form of telekinesis that also lets him... Not telekinesis. Is it telekinesis? Telepathy? I do not know the difference or care. But... sorry. But it follows Danny. He has the shine still. He's still using it regularly to both talk to the dead as well as to... get through life, as well as get advice. He's struggling with alcoholism, and the events of the movie make him want to be a better person. So he starts the movie trying to better himself and eventually runs into this teen with a similar gift to him named Abra. And he and Abra team up to try and stop a cult who is killing other people with the shine and eating their shine to stay alive and have immortality. And then, I know this is gonna make me sound really stupid, but the fan service in this movie. I love me some fan service. Not when it's really, cruddy fan service, like it's just there to. And then this last part, this is gonna make me sound really stupid, but this movie's fan service is just perfectly handled. There's a lot of scenes that are recreations of The Shining in the movie. Like there are scenes that actually seem like they were painstakingly made to match the original shots from The Shining. Very early, there's a scene where Danny Torrance is applying for a job, and the room and the shots are all made to look exactly like that scene in The Shining where Jack Torrance is applying to be the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel. And then most of the actual fan service for the rest of the movie happens at the third act, actually. In between, this movie feels like its own movie. There's actually not much mention to The Shining for the first two acts of the movie. The most is like maybe two parts overall. It's the third act that's actually fan service. And it's just such a cool finale for this movie. It is so cool. Like the final act of this movie is just, there's so much mind-blowingly, painstakingly good-looking recreations of The Shining that just felt so satisfying to watch. I absolutely loved seeing them on screen. Horror movie sequels get a very bad rap because for reasons that usually vary, horror movie sequels get a bad rap. Maybe they switch directors, maybe it's too much like the original, but I can confidently say Doctor Sleep was a great sequel. That's because it feels like its own self-contained movie. Like I said, it's mostly just the third act that's fan service to The Shining, and even then, it's still its own movie. That's what's so great about Doctor Sleep, that it's its own story. Sure, it has to have the events of The Shining to set Doctor Sleep into motion, but within that part, it is all about Danny Torrance on his own separate mission. And I absolutely love that approach to a sequel. I love how, even though it needs the original for continuity and for, context, it still feels wholly original. I just cannot put into words how happy that makes me feel. So overall, I know that I'm probably gonna listen back to these recordings and realize that I said a whole bunch of nothing in a whole lot of time. But realistically, I just wanted to get one last movie review out, and I wanted to talk about movies that made me, that gave me a good time. I really like The Shining. I really like Doctor Sleep. I'm gonna give both The Shining and Doctor Sleep an A+. I really like these movies. These were just both great. Someday, what I want to just watch these back to back. It just makes me feel so good having finally seen these. I don't know. It's like I've been missing out for so long, and finally I'm just there. Yes, I'm so happy to finally have seen these. So just to sum up, because yeah, I definitely rambled too much in this because I just wanted to get this out quickly. I didn't have much time to, think about it. Just to sum up what you just saw, I really like both of these movies. I thought they were both really smart, really good horror movies. Well, that just about does it for my first try at a dual review, The Shining and Doctor Sleep. I really like both these movies. If you haven't seen them yet, like I have for so long, I didn't know what I was missing until recently, you should totally go check them out. They're really great. I really enjoyed them. In the meantime, why don't you tell me what your favorite Stephen King movie is? My favorite, I really like these two, but my favorite has got to be The Shawshank Redemption. It's basic, but everyone likes it for a reason. After you tell me about that, you can head on out. Stay safe and watch good movies. Happy Halloween!